Hello and welcome to our final video in this series on how to convey the importance of your work, of your research in your scientific writing. This final video is going to cover how to set up and how to talk about either the experiments you did in a research paper or the experiments that you're proposing in a research proposal to ensure that the reader is able to follow along with you, with your logic, and is able to understand why you did or will do everything that you propose in this work. This goes a very long way as well towards helping convey the importance of your science to your reader. So if you're ready to figure out how to write your results sections so that your reader can understand the importance of what you did, let's get started. The basic take-home message here with writing the results sections of your papers or your grants is making sure that you have enough context throughout each paragraph so that the reader is going to be able to follow along with the logic that you use throughout and is going to be able to see why you did each of these different experiments. If you can convey to a reader why you did the things that you did, they're going to be more invested in the outcome of the story. They're going to be more interested in it, and that's going to give it an elevated importance in their eyes as well, which is essentially what we want to do. On the converse, a reader who's a little bit confused, who doesn't understand why we did one experiment versus another, is not going to give as much weight or importance to these experiments. So this is what we want to avoid. If we break down a results paragraph, there's a couple things specifically in this paragraph that I want you to look at. So first, please note that the different colors I'm presenting here, the darkest color here, this darkest brown, is going to give some experimental context or a little bit of context around what you are doing. The lighter brown color is going to give some details about the methods or what you did here. And then the yellow color is going to provide the results or what you saw when you did these experiments. And so notice here when we break down a paragraph from a results section that has a very specific format and a very specific flow. And this is something I want you to follow exactly in all of your research papers to make sure you're able to convey this importance here. The first thing I want you to notice here is the first sentence of our paragraph. Notice that this first sentence starts with the darkest brown context color and then moves into the second brown color. What I call this sentence here, I call it a storyline sentence because I want for a reader to be able to skim read the first sentence of every single one of your results paragraphs and have a very good idea of what you did in this paper. And so this is why I call this a storyline sentence. It is setting up the story of your paper. And if we look a little bit more as to the two different parts of our result sections that are included here, you will note that it first explains the why or gives a little bit of context and then gives a what. So every single sentence of your results should start with this storyline sentence, setting up why you did the experiment that you're then presenting and then what you did in that experiment. So this is going to make sure that every single reader is on the same page as you when you are going through your experiments. If a reader cannot understand why you did an experiment, they're going to have a hard time seeing the importance of that experiment. So we want to come in here and add this why right at the beginning of every single one of our results paragraphs. Similarly, at the bottom of this paragraph, you will note that there is also a bit of dark brown context text here as well. And what this sentence is doing, or most of the time just half a sentence, is what I call your take-home message sentence. This is one half to full sentence at the end of every single results paragraph that just gives the reader a little bit of an idea of what you want them to take home from this paragraph. What is the main message of this paragraph? This is because sometimes a reader is not going to be able to look at the results that you give them and directly interpret them for themselves. Maybe it's experiments they haven't done before, something that they haven't seen, something they haven't worked with. They're not going to know what you know from that experiment. So we want to have one sentence at the end. We're going to call it our take-home message sentence that just sums this up for the reader so that moving forward into the next paragraphs, they're not confused. They know exactly what we did. They can see here exactly what we wanted them to learn from this experiment, and they're able to take that knowledge and carry it forward with them into future paragraphs. So this is just going to help sort of prevent confusion in future paragraphs. Now, one more thing to look at here in results paragraphs, and this is going to be a little bit of context within paragraphs. So again, the whole point here is to make sure the reader is able to follow along with everything that we did, because if they can't, then they are not going to understand the importance of what we did. So I want you to compare these two paragraphs here from a results section of a research paper. Note that the first paragraph here has no context within the paragraph itself at all. So here, all of the context is provided at the beginning and at the end, like I just explained. That is because this experiment, with its specific results and the specific way the experiment was done, is something that the writers pretty correctly assumed that every reader of their target journal was going to be able to understand and interpret for themselves. So this is talking about a toxicity study here. Most people know what a toxicity study means. They know what it means when no toxicity is seen. This does not need to be explained, okay? So here, the writer is able to just provide the results, and the reader is able to interpret them for themselves. Now, let's contrast that with this next paragraph here that is showing context throughout the entirety of the paragraph. That's because this is a significantly more difficult experiment. This is an allergen challenge experiment, and most people are not familiar with that. They don't know what it is, they don't know what it means, and they can't take direct readout of results and interpret that for themselves. So note that the writers here correctly filled this paragraph with context, explaining what each one of those points or parts or results of this experiment directly mean in lay terms that their reader is going to be able to understand. This, again, is hugely important because this experiment, this allergen challenge experiment, was one of the bigger ones of this paper. It was one of the most important points that they were making. And if these writers were not able to come in here and correctly add context throughout this paragraph, the reader was going to be lost when they got here. And that, unfortunately, will mean for them that they are not able to understand the importance of the experiment that the writers are presenting here in this part of the paper. So this final part here of our video series of conveying the importance is one of the most nuanced, but it's still one of the most important ones. And this is one of the easiest ones to face. Now, I have a separate blog post up on my site about going into a little bit more detail of storyline sentences. If you're interested in that, the link is here below. So you can check out the post on storyline sentences for how to write your own. But I'm going to quickly give you the formula for a storyline sentence here that you can use in every single one of your paragraphs. It does not matter that the sentence is going to be very similar or have a very similar structure. It's perfectly okay. I promise a lot of very high-level research papers do this and nobody ever notices, okay? This is an easy way to write your papers. I highly recommend it. So every single one of your storyline sentences is, like I said, going to give the reader a why and then a what. So you're going to tell the reader to do this, to learn this, to discover this, to measure this, whatever it is you wanted to do in that experiment. Give them the reason, give them the why, and then tell them what you did, okay? In fairly simplistic terms, this first sentence is not meant to contain too many details. So this sentence is just going to tell the reader to do whatever it is you wanted to do. We did whatever it is you did to measure or determine or find that out. And that's going to be your first sentence of every paragraph of your results. For the final sentence of your results, this is where you want to just end with something like, that means that, or meaning, or signifying, or indicating, or whatever it is, some sort of lead word like that, and then give, again, a half sentence up to a one sentence, just overview summary of what you want the reader to take home. Finally, for including the appropriate amount of context clues now throughout your paper to help fill in those experiments that might be tricky, you want to think about where you're aiming to publish or who your audience here is going to be. And then any experiment that you do that is not standard For the highest level college course that your whole entire audience has in common, you're going to want to explain in some detail. So for instance, most people are going to have an idea of what DNA is, so you're not going to have to tell them what you mean when you measured a DNA concentration or something. They will understand that. Most of your scientific audience will understand that. But they might not understand some of the more nuanced details about, for instance, sequencing DNA or doing high throughput sequencing or batch sequencing or something like that. Here is where you might need to go in and fill in with a little bit of context, just explaining what something means, what information you're able to determine from a specific experiment, okay? Here is where you want to make sure that however you're interpreting the results of your experiment, your reader is right there with you. So whatever information you need to give them there to sort of help them interpret this, help them understand what you did, is going to go a very long way towards conveying the importance of your work. And then finally, just relating this again back to grant proposals for anybody here who's working on grant proposals, it's going to be the same thing. You're just going to talk about future experiments, not past experiments. And so here you're going to say, to do this, we will do this. You're not going to say we did. And again, just like before, you're going to give a little bit at the end of each paragraph explaining what information you want to gather or glean or determine from the experiments that you're proposing doing. And again, just like the regular research paper, anything that might not be standard or easily understood by everybody of your audience is going to need to also have those context clues. So that concludes our final video of this series on how to make sure you are conveying the importance of your work through your scientific writing. For any questions or comments, please feel free to comment below. I respond to everyone. Also, please do subscribe to my channel to get more videos like this in the future. Otherwise, hopefully now you're going to have no more issues conveying the importance of your science through your writing, and I'll let you get to it. Happy writing.